The galaxy was wide, filled with countless stars, but in the halls of the Alari Palace, silence hung heavy. Queen Serena stood by the great crystal window, looking out into the night sky. Her world had once been bright with music and trade, her people strong and proud. Now the cities burned, and the air carried the sound of sorrow. For months, the Drexer fleets had struck without rest. They moved like a storm across the galaxy, their warships endless, their armies pressing forward. With cold precision, the Alari had tried to resist. Their ships were fast, their warriors skilled, but they were too few. Every battle drained them, every victory was costly, and every defeat cut deep into their spirit. Serena's advisors gathered in the chamber, their faces drawn with fear. General Aaron, once known for his calm strength, spoke in a voice that carried both anger and despair. "Your Majesty, we cannot hold another month. Our fleets are broken. The Drexer have taken 3 more colonies this week. If we do not find allies, the Alari will fall." The queen closed her eyes. She had already sent messages to the great empires, the Solari Alliance, the Kellan hierarchy, even the distant Volari collectives. No one had answered. To them, the Alari were small, unimportant. Helping them meant risking the wrath of the Drexer. The galaxy was full of speeches about honor and unity, but when the fire burned, everyone protected only their own worlds. Still, Serena would not give up. She turned to her advisors. "We will send one last message. We will not beg, but we will speak the truth. Let it go to every corner of the galaxy, even to forgotten worlds no one remembers. If no one comes, then we will fight until we are ash and dust. But at least the stars will know we asked." That night, the queen entered the communication hall. The great beacon stood at the center, its surface glowing faintly. She stepped forward, her crown removed, her robes plain. No symbols of power, no show of pride, only her voice would travel across the stars. When the beacon activated, Serena began to speak. "This is Queen Serena of the Alari people. We face the end. The Drexer come without pause, and we are too few to stand alone. We have asked for aid, but silence has answered us. Still, we send this message not with anger, but with hope. If there are any who still believe in courage, if there are any who still remember what it means to stand for more than themselves, hear us now. We do not expect help. We do not expect to be saved. But if there is anyone, anywhere, who would fight beside us, know that we would welcome you not as strangers, but as brothers and sisters." Her words were simple. No promise of riches, no offer of glory, just truth, just need. When the beacon dimmed, the chamber was still. General Aaron bowed his head. "Your Majesty, few will hear, fewer will care." Serena nodded, though her heart ached. "Perhaps, but we must try. If even one ship answers, then hope is not lost." Days passed. The message traveled through deep space, carried on streams of light, bouncing from relay to relay across the galaxy. Worlds ignored it. Some leaders heard and turned away, unwilling to risk their own borders. Others never bothered to listen at all. On the planet Alara itself, the people tried to endure. Families huddled in the remains of their homes, soldiers trained with broken weapons. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. Every night, the queen walked the ruined gardens of the palace and wondered if her people would see. Another season died, and yet, though Serena did not know it, her words did not vanish into silence. Far away, on a quiet blue world called Earth, a small listening post picked up the signal. It was almost by accident. The humans had never been considered important in the affairs of the galaxy. Their world was young compared to the ancient civilizations. Among the stars, their fleets were few, their colonies scattered. Still, the message reached them. A communications officer named Tomas stared at the strange voice that came through his console. He replayed it again and again. He had heard messages of trade, reports of battles, warnings from distant empires, but never had he heard a plea so honest. So filled with both sorrow and hope, he leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself. They thought no one would answer. The thought would not leave him, and though Earth was quiet, And though its leaders had long chosen to stay away from galactic struggles, the seed of something new had been planted. The Queen's voice, carried across the stars, had found a listener.
On Earth, the night was quiet. The stars stretched across the sky, far away and untouched, but inside the listening post, the silence was broken by the steady hum of machines. Tomas sat at his station, his eyes fixed on the message that had come from deep space. He had replayed it many times, and each time the Queen's voice struck something inside him. "This is Queen Serena of the Ayalari people." Her words carried weight. They were not like the usual messages of empires filled with pride, promises, and warnings. This was different. It was honest. It was the sound of someone standing at the edge of despair, yet refusing to fall. Thomas copied the message and sent it to the Earth Council. Most reports sent to the Council were ignored, but this one would not leave his thoughts. He could not forget the part where she said, "We do not expect to be saved." The following morning, the Council gathered. The chamber was round, filled, with officials who represented Earth's colonies and cities. Tomas stood before them, nervous, as he played the recording. The Queen's voice filled the room. When it ended, silence followed. Finally, Councillor Raylan spoke. He was old, his voice calm but weary. "A desperate people far away. The Drexar are no small enemy. If the great empires have turned away, why should Earth do otherwise? We are small. We are still building our place in the stars. This is not our fight." Another councillor nodded. "We risk much by getting involved. If the Drexar notice us, they may turn their eyes here. Earth cannot stand against them." The words settled like heavy stones. Many agreed. Earth had only a modest fleet. Its colonies were scattered, its resources limited. To fight against the Drexar was to invite destruction. But not everyone stayed silent. From the far side of the chamber, a younger councillor named Mira rose to speak. She was not known for grand speeches, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. "If no one answers them, then what are we building here? If we hide while others fall, what will we say when the day comes that we need help? Will we not hope someone answers us too?" Some shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away. Tomas, standing at the center, gathered his courage. "We may be small, but that does not mean we are powerless. The Queen asked not for an empire. She asked for anyone willing to stand. We could be those people. Even one ship, even one crew could make a difference." His words hung in the air. The council debated for hours. Many still resisted, fearing the risk. But the thought of doing nothing, of ignoring the plea as so many others had, weighed heavily on them. At last, a decision was made, not to send an army, for Earth had none to spare, but to send a single vessel. The starship Aurora would be chosen. It was not the largest, nor the most advanced, but it was fast, reliable, and its crew had faced danger before. Mira, the same counselor who had spoken with fire in her eyes, was selected to lead the mission. She had once been a captain in Earth's defense fleet, and though she had stepped into politics, her heart still belonged among the stars. When Thomas heard the news, he felt both relief and fear. Relief that Earth had not remained silent, fear that one ship might not be enough. Yet, as he looked at the stars that night, he remembered Serena's words. "If even one ship answers." On the Aurora, preparations began. Engineers checked. The engines, pilots tested navigation systems, and soldiers cleaned their weapons. Some whispered doubts. What could one ship do against a tide of war? But Mira reminded them that they were not going to conquer. They were going to stand beside those who had been left alone. The day of departure came quickly. Families gathered to say goodbye to their loved ones. The Aurora stood tall in the spaceport. its silver frame shining under the light of dawn. Tomas was there too, though he would not be joining the crew. He had been the one to hear the call, and he wanted to. "See them off." Mira approached him before boarding. "You were the first to believe this mattered," she told him. "Without you, the council would have ignored it. Remember that." Tomas smiled faintly. "It was not me. It was her voice. I only listened." The Aurora lifted into the sky, engines roaring as it broke through the clouds. In the control room, Mira looked out at the endless stars. Ahead lay a people who believed no one would come. Ahead lay danger and uncertainty. But she felt no regret. On the world of the Aelari, Queen Serena still walked the ruins of her gardens at night, her heart heavy with silence. She believed her message had faded into the void. She did not yet know that somewhere across the stars, a small human ship was already on its way, carrying with it the answer she thought would never come. Far from Earth, the Aurora crossed the silent stretch of space. Stars glittered in the distance, but inside the ship, the crew worked with quiet focus. Each of them knew the risks. They were not traveling to trade or explore. They were heading toward a battlefield, answering a call that the rest of the galaxy had ignored. Captain Mira stood on the command deck, her hands behind her back. She had seen war before, but this was different. Earth had never fought the Drexar. To face them, with only one ship, seemed almost foolish, but Mira carried no doubt. She had argued for this mission herself. If she wavered now, her crew would falter. "Navigation locked," said Aaron, the young pilot. "We will reach Aelari space in 2 days." "Keep us hidden as much as possible," Mira replied. "We do not know how close the Drexar patrols are." The Aurora was not the most powerful vessel in the galaxy, but it was fast and clever. Its systems were designed for adaptation, and its crew had been trained to think beyond rules. That was what made them human. On the distant world of Aelara, Queen Serena sat in her council chamber. The walls trembled with the distant rumble of explosions. The Drexar had pushed closer, and every day, the Aelari army lost more ground. Her generals stood before her, their voices sharp with tension. "We have no allies," one of them said. "The empires ignore us. We must accept that this is the end." Serena raised her hand. "We will not surrender. Even if the galaxy turns its back, we will fight until we can fight no longer." But in her heart, she felt the weight of despair. Every message she had sent had gone unanswered. She feared her people would vanish, their songs and history lost forever. Then, as the council argued, a signal flashed across the chamber. The communications officer, pale with surprise, rushed forward. "Your Majesty," he said breathlessly, "we have received a reply." The room froze. Every eye turned to him. "From who?" The officer hesitated. It is not from an empire. It is from a single vessel. They call themselves human. They are on their way here." The general scoffed. One shook his head. "One ship? That is no answer. This must be a mistake." Another sneered. "Perhaps they are scavengers looking for scraps from our ruins." But Serena's gaze did not waver. "Humans," she whispered, tasting the word as if it were strange and new. She had heard of them only in passing. A quiet people, overlooked by the galaxy, building slowly on their own world. No one had ever expected them to step into great battles. "Bring me their message," she ordered. The screen lit up. A face appeared, a woman with calm eyes and firm voice. "This is Captain Mira of the human vessel Aurora. We received your call. We are coming, not as conquerors, not as rescuers, but as allies. We cannot promise victory, but we can promise that you will not stand alone." The words were plain. No grand speeches, no boasts. Yet Serena felt something stir within her chest, something she had not felt in many long months. Hope. Her generals muttered their doubts. "One ship cannot change the tide." But Serena silenced them with a raised hand. Perhaps one ship cannot, but courage can. If the humans are brave enough to answer when all others turned away, then they are worth hearing. 2 days later, the Aurora entered Aelari space. The crew stared at the sight before them. Broken fleets drifting in silence, ruined stations glowing faintly, cities on the surface scarred with fire. "This is worse than I imagined," Arani whispered. Mira stood tall. "Then we arrived at the right time. They sent a signal to the palace requesting permission to land. The Aelari hesitated at first, but Serena herself gave the order. Let them come. If they dared this far, they have earned the right to be seen." The Aurora descended into the atmosphere, engines cutting through smoke-filled skies. Soldiers and civilians alike watched in disbelief as the strange ship landed at the edge of a ruined stronghold. Few had ever seen humans before, and many whispered doubts. Queen Serena arrived with her guard. She expected arrogance or perhaps desperation. But when Captain Mira stepped down the ramp, she carried neither. Her uniform was simple, her weapons unpolished compared to the glittering arms of other species. Yet her eyes were steady, and her voice carried without fear. "Your Majesty," Mira said, bowing her head, "we came because you called. We are few, but we are ready to fight beside you." Serena studied her for a long moment. There was no pride in Mira's tone, no empty promise of salvation, only truth, only resolve. At last, Serena spoke. "The galaxy left us to die, yet you came. Perhaps one ship is not enough to win a war, but it may be enough to light a fire." Behind her, her soldiers stirred. For the first time in many days, their queen's voice carried hope. And for the first time in their history, the Aelari looked upon humanity, not as strangers, but as allies who had answered when no one else would. The ruined stronghold smelled of ash and smoke. Its walls were cracked, its towers broken, but for the Aelari it was still a place of honor. Here they had fought their fiercest battles. Here they had lost many lives. And now, at this very place, Queen Serena stood waiting for the humans. The Aurora's ramp lowered with a hiss of steam. Captain Mira led her crew down, walking with calm steps. Her uniform was plain, her face steady, but her eyes showed respect as she looked upon the alien queen and her guards. Behind Mira, a small team followed. Pilots, engineers, and soldiers. They carried no banners, no grand symbols. Only their presence spoke for them. The Aelari soldiers gripped their weapons tightly. Many of them whispered in doubt. To them, the humans looked fragile compared to the towering warriors of the galaxy. They wore no shining armor, no heavy plating, only simple suits and light gear. Could these people truly fight against the Drexar? Queen Serena raised her hand, silencing her guards. She stepped forward, her tall figure cloaked in silver robes, though the fabric was worn from days of war. Her crown had long been set aside. Now she stood not as a ruler wrapped in glory, but as a leader sharing the hardship of her people. "You are the humans," she said, her voice low but clear. Mira bowed her head slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty. We came because we heard your call." Serena studied her carefully. She saw no arrogance, no demand for reward. The human captain spoke with the tone of someone who had chosen to stand beside strangers without hesitation. That alone surprised her. "You crossed half the galaxy for us," Serena said slowly. "Yet you bring only one ship. Do you not see how hopeless this is?" Mira met her gaze without fear. "I see the danger clearly, but I also see that your people still fight, even when the galaxy abandoned you. That is not hopeless, that is strength. We are not here to replace your armies, we are here to stand with them," the Queen's generals muttered at her side. One of them, old General Aaron, spoke in frustration. "One ship will not change the tide. These humans cannot save us. Their courage will mean nothing against the Drexar fleets. Mira turned toward him, her voice firm. Perhaps not, but one spark can light a fire. One act of resistance can give hope. That is what we bring. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made even the general pause. The Aelari had heard many speeches from great leaders, filled with pride and promises. Yet this human spoke plainly, without boasting. She asked for nothing but the chance to fight beside them. Queen Serena lifted her head, her eyes softening. You speak of sparks, Captain Mira. Do you truly believe one spark can stand against a storm? Mira's lips curved into a faint, steady smile. Not alone. But with others, yes. We will fight as long as we breathe. That is the only promise we can make. For a long moment, silence filled the stronghold. The sound of distant battle rumbled, like thunder. But here the two leaders faced each other, separated by worlds yet bound by the same need. At last, Serena extended her hand. The gesture was old among the Aelari, a sign of shared purpose. Mira stepped forward and placed her hand over the Queen's. It was the first time in months Serena felt the warmth of an ally. The Aelari soldiers watched in disbelief. Their queen, who had stood alone against despair, was now joined by strangers from a forgotten world. Whispers spread quickly among them. The humans have come. They are not many, but they came. That night, in the council chamber of the stronghold, both sides gathered. Maps of battlefields lit the table, showing where the Drexar pressed hardest. The Aelari generals explained the hopelessness of their situation. Broken fleets, shattered supply lines, cities under siege. Mira and her crew listened carefully. They did not speak of miracles, but they asked sharp questions. They suggested movements, strikes, and traps that the Aelari had never considered. Their way of thinking was different, flexible, quick, and bold. At first, the generals resisted. But as the discussion grew, even they began to see value in the strange human ideas. Mira's calm tone and steady presence slowly melted their pride. Queen. Serena watched all of it, a quiet fire growing within her. For so long she had begged the stars for help, and silence had answered. Now, though it was only one ship, only a handful of humans, she saw what she had almost lost. The belief that resistance was not yet over. When the council ended, Serena walked with Mira through the ruined garden of the stronghold. The air was heavy with smoke, but faintly, flowers still bloomed among the stones. You could have stayed on your world, Serena said softly. You could have ignored our plea as others did. Why did you come? Mira looked at the broken garden and then at the Queen. Because we know what it means to stand alone, and because no voice deserves to fade unheard. The Queen's steps slowed. Her heart, heavy with despair for so long, felt lighter. For the first time since the Drexar invasion, she allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The first battle after the humans arrived came sooner than anyone expected. Drexar scouts had discovered a hidden Aelari outpost on a rocky moon. If it fell, the Drexar would gain a direct path into the last safe region of Aelari space. Queen. Serena stood with her generals, watching the battle maps flicker with grim predictions. We do not have enough forces to hold the moon, General Aaron said, his voice low. If we send what remains of our fleet, the Drexar will crush us before reinforcements arrive. Captain Mira studied the map in silence. The enemy numbers were overwhelming, but she did not look defeated. At last she spoke, her voice steady. You have been fighting them on their terms, strength against strength. But humans do not fight that way. We survive by being unpredictable. The generals frowned, but Serena leaned forward. What do you suggest? Mira pointed to the narrow canyons across the moon's surface. The Drexar rely on large, heavy units. They move like a wave. If we strike fast and vanish, if we make them believe they are facing more than they are, they will slow down. All we need is time. Serena looked at her, uncertain, but she saw the same fire in Mira's eyes that she had seen during their first meeting. Slowly, the queen nodded. Very well. Show us what your people can do. The Aurora's crew prepared quickly. They were used to moving with little. Their weapons were modest, their armor light, but they carried with them a spirit that no machine could measure. They landed on the moon, joined by a small unit of Ailari soldiers. The Ailari warriors were doubtful at first. Their tall, armored figures stood beside the smaller humans, who carried only simple gear. One soldier muttered, "These humans will not last an hour." But Mira only gave a quiet smile. "Then stay close. We will show you how we fight." As the Drexar approached, the ground shook with the weight of their machines. Their dark, towering walkers filled the horizon, and their warships thundered overhead. Against them, the defenders looked like shadows too small to matter. Mira split her team into small groups. "Do not face them head-on," she ordered. "Strike where they are weak, then disappear before they can strike back. Keep moving. Make them believe we are everywhere." The first strike came from the cliffs. A human soldier named Thomas crouched. With his rifle, fired into the side of a Drexar walker. The shot struck a weak joint, and the great machine collapsed with a thunderous crash. Before the enemy could respond, Thomas was already gone, sliding down the canyon with the Ailari at his side. On the opposite ridge, another group set explosives along the rocks. When the Drexar forces advanced, the cliffs exploded, raining stone and fire down upon them. The enemy halted, confused, their formations broken. From the shadows, humans and Ailari struck again and again. They moved like ghosts, never staying in one place long enough to be trapped. For every shot the Drexar fired, they hit only dust and empty air. The Ailari soldiers, once doubtful, found themselves amazed. The humans did not fight with brute strength, but with cleverness, speed, and endless determination. Every time it seemed they would be crushed, they slipped away, leaving the enemy frustrated and bleeding. Hours passed, and the moon became a maze of fire and echoes. The Drexar, who had once believed the battle would end quickly, grew slower, their movements cautious. Rumors spread among them. There were whispers of a hidden army, of thousands waiting in the canyons. In truth, it was only a handful of humans and Ailari working together. But the illusion of strength was enough. From her command center, Queen Serena listened to the reports with growing disbelief. "They hold the line," General Aaron said, his voice tinged with wonder. "One ship's crew and a few squads of our soldiers. They have delayed the Drexar for half a day." Serena closed her eyes, a small smile touching her lips. It was not victory, but it was hope. When the battle finally ended, the Drexar pulled back, unwilling to waste more troops on the rocky moon. The defenders emerged from the dust, weary but alive. One Ailari soldier approached Mira, his armor scorched, his face filled with new respect. "I doubted you," he admitted. "But today I saw how humans fight. You do not fear impossible odds. You make the impossible bend." Mira gave a small nod. "We are not stronger than the Drexar, but we do not give up. That is our way." Word of the victory spread quickly through the Ailari worlds. For the first time in years, the people spoke not only of loss, but of resistance. They whispered of the humans, the strangers who came when no one else would. Stories spread of how a small crew turned back a tide, how their courage lit a spark. Queen Serena stood before her people and declared, "We are not alone. Humanity has stood beside us. If they can fight with such spirit, then so can we. The Miivre Drexar will not break us. Not now. Not ever." The soldiers cheered. Civilians lifted their heads. Across the broken worlds of the Iolari, the spark became a flame, and though Mira and her crew knew the war was far from over, they also knew this. Truth. Sometimes one spark was enough to light the darkest sky. The victory on the rocky moon spread like fire across Alari space. It was not a great battle compared to the galaxy's endless wars, but it was more than the Alari had seen in many years. For the first time, people whispered not of defeat, but of resistance. They spoke of the humans, small in number, yet impossible to break. In the palace, Queen Serena listened to the reports. Each one told of soldiers who fought harder, citizens who lifted their heads with new pride, and commanders who dared to plan again. The queen knew why. The humans had shown them that courage could be stronger than fear. General Aaron stood before her, his face lined with both disbelief and hope. Your Majesty, the people believe again. They say the humans fight as though they cannot be broken. This spirit has spread to our own soldiers. Even our youngest recruits now say, if the humans can fight, so can we. Serena nodded slowly. Then it is time to do more than defend. It is time to strike back. On the Aurora, Mira gathered her crew and the Alari generals around a glowing star map. Drexar fleets spread across the display like dark scars, their lines pressing into Alari territory. For too long, the Alari had only retreated, but now the humans proposed something different. We cannot face them ship for ship, Mira said firmly. Their numbers will crush us, but numbers do not matter if the enemy cannot trust their own strength. We must strike where it hurts most. Aaron leaned forward. Their supply lines, he realized. Mira nodded. Yes, if we strike their fuel depots, their transport ships, their relay stations, they will lose speed. Their fleets will slow, their armies will starve, they will begin to fear shadows. At first, the Alari generals were unsure. To fight without direct battle seemed dishonorable. But Serena silenced them. What matters is survival. Honor means nothing. If we are ash, we will follow this path. The campaign began quickly. Small groups of Alari ships, guided by human tactics, launched sudden raids. They struck at night, vanishing before the Drexar could gather. Fuel stations exploded. Transports were destroyed and communication lines cut. The Drexar commanders grew furious. Their fleet slowed as they tried to guard every route, but the humans and Alari always seemed to appear where they were weakest. On one raid, Mira herself led the strike. The Aurora slipped through debris fields and asteroids, weaving between hidden patrols. At the right moment, its weapons fired, destroying a Drexar supply ship in a blaze of light. Before enemy reinforcements arrived, the Aurora was gone, vanishing into the shadows. The Alari soldiers cheered. They fight like ghosts, one said with awe. Every time we think they will be caught, they slip away. The Drexar do not know how to face them. Weeks passed, and the effect grew. Once the Alari had been the hunted, always fleeing before the storm. Now they became the hunters. The Drexar advanced more slowly, their commanders unsure of when and where the next strike would come. Queen Serena stood before her people in a broadcast, her voice strong again. The galaxy left us to fall, but with our new allies we rise. We will not be erased. The Drexar will not take our worlds. This is our home, and we will fight for it. Her words spread across the stars, carried by both Alari and human signals. For the first time, the Drexar were forced to admit that the Alari were no longer a dying race. But victory did not come without cost. Every raid was dangerous. Soldiers were lost, ships were damaged, and supplies grew thin. On one mission, Thomas, the human communications officer, was nearly caught when Drexar patrols closed in. He barely escaped, his shuttle scorched with fire. When he returned, Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. You took a great risk, she said quietly. Thomas smiled faintly, though his face was pale. Worth it. Every day we keep them guessing. Is another day the Ailari survive? The crew agreed. None of them had come expecting safety. They had come because one plea had reached their world, and because no one else had answered. As the raids continued, a strange thing happened. Other species, watching from the shadows of the galaxy, began to notice. The Keelan hierarchy, once silent, sent observers. The Solari Alliance, which had ignored Serena's earlier pleas, sent quiet messages of interest. "They are watching us now," Serena said to Mira as they stood on the command deck of the Aurora. "They wonder if humanity truly is as fearless as the stories say." Mira shook her head. "We are not fearless. We are only stubborn. Fear is real, but so is the choice to keep going." Serena smiled at her words. For the first time, she believed that the Drexar could be beaten, not with power, but with spirit, with cleverness, with allies who refused to surrender. The tide of war had begun to turn. The Drexar were no longer marching unchallenged. The Ailari stood taller, their courage reborn. And at the heart of it all was the Aurora, a single human ship that had dared to answer when no one else would. The Queen knew the war was far from over. The Drexar were still vast, their fleets endless. But now, the Ailari were not alone. They had found an ally who fought with fire and heart. And sometimes, Serena thought as she watched the humans work beside her people, that was enough to change the fate of worlds. The raids had shaken the Drexar Empire. Supply lines were broken and their fleets slowed across the stars. For the first time in living memory, the Ailari were not only surviving, but fighting back. Yet everyone knew this was not the end. The Drexar were still vast, their armies stretched across countless worlds. One final battle was coming, and all could feel it. On the Aurora, Captain Mira stood with Queen Serena before the star map. A new red mark pulsed at the edge of the galaxy. The Drexar High Fleet, led by their supreme commander, was gathering for one great strike. If it succeeded, Ailari resistance would be crushed forever. Serena's voice was calm, though her eyes showed the weight she carried. "This is their answer to us. They want to end our hope before it spreads further." Mira nodded. "Then we must make our stand here. If we stop them, the galaxy will see the Drexar can be beaten. Others will rise to join us. If we fail—" She did not need to finish the thought. Preparations began at once. The Ailari Navy, though small, gathered every ship they had. Old cruisers, patched fighters, even civilian crafts fitted with weapons. All answered the call. What once had been a broken fleet was now an army of defiance. The Aurora became the heart of the defense. Human technology guided Ailari formations, teaching them to strike fast, scatter, and regroup. Every pilot trained under human officers, learning to fight not with numbers, but with speed and wit. In the palace, Serena spoke to her people in one final broadcast before the battle. Her voice was strong and clear. "My people, we have suffered much. We have been left alone, forgotten by allies, betrayed by silence. But one ship came when no one else did. One crew chose to answer our plea. They fight not because they must, but because they believe no voice should go unheard. We fight beside them now, and we will fight for our home. This is not the end of us. It is our beginning." Her words traveled across every world, carried even to distant observers who had long doubted the Ailari. For the first time, the galaxy waited to see if a miracle could be born. The day of battle arrived. At the edge of Ailari space, the Drexar fleet appeared. Hundreds of warships, dark and endless, stretching like a storm across the stars. The Aurora stood at the front lines, its crew silent and ready. Thomas checked communication links, Lyra monitored power systems, and Mira gave her final command. "No matter what happens, we hold. Remember why we fight, not for victory alone, but for each other." The Drexar advanced, their weapons blazing. The sky filled with light and fire. The Alari ships scattered, striking quickly and then vanishing, just as the humans had taught them. Small victories built into larger ones. Enemy ships fell one by one, but the Alari also suffered. Every moment was costly. Mira's voice guided them through the storm. Focus on their carriers, break their shields, then move fast. Do not let them trap you. In the heart of the fight, the Aurora faced the Drexar flagship. It was massive, like a fortress in space, its weapons burning brighter than suns. Serena stood beside Mira on the command deck, her hand tightening on the rail. If their flagship falls, their fleets will falter, Serena said. Then that's our target, Mira replied firmly. The Aurora led a group of Ailari ships in a daring run. They weaved through fire, their shields cracking, engines straining. Every strike brought them closer. The enemy flagship turned its full power on them, but the smaller ships darted around it like blades of light. Finally, with one last surge, the Aurora's weapons fired into the heart of the Drexar ship. Explosions tore across its hull. For a moment, silence filled the void. Then the mighty flagship broke apart, vanishing into fire and shadow. Across the battlefield, the Drexar hesitated. Their greatest ship had fallen to those they once thought, too weak to resist. Fear spread among them, and their lines began to waver. The Ailari struck harder. Inspired by victory, they pushed the Drexar back, driving them from the edge of their worlds. One by one, enemy ships fell or fled. By the battle's end, the Drexar had retreated, leaving behind their broken fleets. On the Aurora, cheers filled the air. Thomas slammed his fist against the console in triumph, and Lyra laughed through tears. Mira only closed her eyes, letting out a long breath. They had survived. More than that, they had won. Queen Serena turned to Mira, her voice filled with gratitude. You came when no one else would. You gave us back our courage. The Ailari will never forget this. Mira smiled faintly. You called for help and someone had to answer. That is enough for us. In the days that followed, word spread across the galaxy. The Ailari had risen again, not alone, but with the help of those who had dared to believe their voice mattered. Other races began to speak of alliance, no longer willing to bow before Drexar rule. And at the center of every story was the Aurora, the single human ship that had answered when all others turned away. The Ailari called it the answer that changed everything. For in a galaxy where silence had been louder than hope, one act of courage had broken the darkness. One ship, one crew, and one choice had shown the truth. No cry for help should ever be left unanswered, and from that day forward, the Ailari were no longer alone.